When you hear this story, I want you to tell me one thing at the end. Tell me where you were sitting when you listened to it. Tell me if you were in your room, on your couch, maybe cooking, maybe driving, or maybe lying in bed trying to fall asleep. I want to know because this story, it changed me. And maybe, in some quiet way, it will change you too. So before I begin, just promise me one thing in the comments below. Tell me where you're listening from. Now, let me tell you what happened. I pretended to be poor when I met my daughter-in-law's family. I did not plan it. I did not mean to deceive anyone. But sometimes life places you in a moment where you have to choose between protecting your heart or protecting your pride. And that day, I chose my heart. It started with a whisper inside me, the kind that tells you something is wrong long before anyone says it out loud. My son, Daniel, had been acting different ever since he started dating his now wife, Emily. I could feel distance in the way he spoke, in the way his eyes drifted away from mine, in the way he rushed his phone calls. I told myself it was normal. Children grow up, they fall in love, they build new lives, and a mother must learn to step back with grace. But even grace becomes heavy when it feels one-sided. Still, I tried to be happy. I smiled when he told me how kind her family was. I nodded when he said her parents were very particular. I didn't ask what he meant by that word. I didn't want to know. Sometimes parents pretend not to hear things because the truth might hurt more than silence. When he told me they wanted to meet me, my heart fluttered like it used to when he was a small boy showing me his school drawings. I thought, this is a chance to know the family he loved, a chance to feel included, a chance, maybe, to still be part of his life. I remember standing in front of my closet that morning, touching the clothes I had saved for years, the dress I wore to my husband's retirement dinner, the soft blue sweater Daniel bought me one Christmas, the scarf my sister knitted before she passed away. All of them carried memories. All of them felt too loud. So instead, I chose the simplest things I owned. A faded beige blouse with a tiny thread coming loose at the collar, a long skirt I usually wore when I gardened, shoes Daniel used to joke were too comfortable to be pretty. I don't know why I picked those clothes. Maybe I wanted to look gentle. Maybe I wanted to seem harmless. Maybe I wanted to show them that I wasn't coming to impress them, only to meet them with an open heart. But when Daniel saw me, he hesitated. Just for a second. A single second long enough for a mother to feel a lifetime of truth. "Mom, are you sure you want to wear that?" His voice was soft, but his eyes, they told a different story. A story of embarrassment, a story of worry, a story that made something inside me crack. I smiled anyway, because that's what mothers do. We smile through storms so our children don't drown in them. But that was only the first whisper. There would be many more. And one of them would break my heart in a way I never expected. If you're still here, stay with me. The story is just beginning. The moment I stepped inside their house, I felt something shift in the air. It was a beautiful home, warm in color but cold in feeling. There were polished wooden floors, tall white walls, and framed family photos arranged perfectly along the staircase. Everything seemed spotless, almost too spotless, like a place where nothing out of order was forgiven. Emily walked in from the dining room with a soft smile. A sweet girl, really. I could see why my son loved her. She had gentle eyes, but there was a nervousness in her movements, as if she wasn't sure how to balance both her worlds. She hugged me, but it was quick, almost rushed, like she didn't want anyone watching her be too close to me. Behind her, her father entered. Tall, stiff, polite. He shook my hand with a firm grip, but didn't look me directly in the eyes. And in that moment, I realized something important. They weren't unkind people. They were just people who had built their lives on certain expectations. Expectations of class, appearance, and presentation. And I, standing there in my old blouse and worn shoes, I did not fit into that picture. We all walked to the dining room. The table was already set with folded napkins, glassware shining under the chandelier, plates arranged like it was a holiday dinner. I felt small again, but I kept my shoulders straight and my smile steady. Emily's mother gestured for me to sit. I chose a seat near the corner, hoping it would make things easier for everyone. As I sat, the chair made a small sound, and the room went quiet for a second too long, a second filled with subtle discomfort. I tried to break the silence with a simple, harmless question. "Your home is lovely," I said. "Did you decorate it yourself?" Her mother smiled politely. "We had a designer come in. It's important that things look a certain way." Emotional and deep. There was meaning in her voice. And even though her words were gentle, something inside me tightened. I folded my hands in my lap and nodded. As we settled, I saw Daniel watching everything closely. I could tell he wanted things to go smoothly. He kept giving me little smiles, small reassurances, like he was silently begging me not to take anything personally. That alone told me he already knew what his fiancé's family was like. Dinner began quietly. Emily's mother served the dishes. Her father asked Daniel questions about work. Emily talked softly, barely breathing between her sentences. Everyone spoke with a certain grace, a certain tone, a certain polish. And then there was me. I didn't fit in with that flow. My voice sounded too simple. My words felt too plain. Halfway through dinner, I reached for a serving bowl, and my bracelet accidentally tapped the glass. It made a light sound. Not loud, not disruptive, but enough for her mother to pause and glance at my hands. It lasted only a moment, but I felt it. I felt everything. Emily noticed, and she tried to make me feel included. "Mom makes this recipe every holiday," she said softly to me. "Try some, you'll love it." I smiled at her, grateful for the effort. But then I heard it again. A whisper. This time from the father, low, almost breathless. "He seems modest." The word modest sounded harmless, but the way he said it made it feel like something else, like a judgment, like a label. Another whisper followed, this time from the mother so soft I almost doubted myself. "He said she was quiet. I didn't expect." I lowered my eyes to my plate. I wasn't embarrassed by my clothes. I was embarrassed that my son had to sit there pretending nothing was wrong. The clinking of utensils became louder than the conversation. The room felt too bright, like the lights were exposing everything I didn't want them to see. Emily tried again to include me. "Mom," she said to her mother, "Daniel's mother cooks the best chicken soup. You should try it someday." Her mother smiled politely. "I'm sure she does," she said in a tone that felt like a pat on the head instead of a compliment. I kept eating quietly. After a few minutes, I excused myself to wash my hands. The bathroom was down the hall, and I walked slowly. letting my fingers trail against the wallpaper to steady myself. But I didn't know their voices would follow me. I didn't mean to overhear them. Truly, I didn't. But as I turned the corner, I heard my name, and then a whisper that made my heart stop in my chest. Daniel could have married someone from a more refined background. Refined. That word echoed inside me. I knew they meant no direct harm. I knew people were allowed to have opinions. But hearing it about me, hearing it while I was still under their roof, it stung in a way I wasn't prepared for. I stood there quietly for a moment, hidden by the wall, letting the truth settle into me, letting the hurt wash over me, quietly, privately, so my tears would not fall where anyone could see them. When I returned to the table, I smiled softly, because that is what mothers do. We protect the people we love from our pain. Daniel looked at me, sensing something had changed. His eyes searched my face, but I didn't let him find anything. I wasn't ready for him to know. Not yet. Because deep down, I suspected the worst whisper was still waiting for me. And I was right. When dinner ended, Emily suggested that we all sit in the living room for tea. I followed everyone quietly, walking behind them like a guest who wasn't sure if she truly belonged there. The living room was even grander than the dining room. Cream-colored sofas, soft rugs, and gold picture frames, and a fireplace that looked like it hadn't been used in years, but was kept spotless for appearance. I sat on the very edge of the sofa, keeping my hands folded together. I didn't want to touch anything. I didn't want to be the one who left fingerprints on their perfect world. Emily's father poured tea, carefully, as if the cups were too fragile for anyone else to handle. He handed mine with a polite nod, not a smile, just a nod, and I accepted it the same way. Quiet, gentle, trying not to cause any waves. For a few minutes, the conversation flowed harmlessly. Work, weather, holiday plans, nothing too personal, nothing that involved me. Then, for the first time that evening, her mother looked directly at me and asked a question. "So, what do you do?" She said it to me with a tone that wasn't rude. It wasn't curious either. It was evaluative. As if she was examining a resume she didn't request. I smiled softly. I used to work at a small clinic as a receptionist. I retired early to take care of family. She lifted her eyebrows almost imperceptibly. "A clinic," she repeated like she was tasting the word for the first time. Emily stepped in, her voice gentle. "Daniel told you, Mom. She handled everything there. Patients loved her." Her mother gave a stiff smile. "I'm sure she does." I wrapped my fingers around the warm teacup, grounding myself. I wasn't ashamed of my work. I wasn't ashamed of my life, but in that room, surrounded by people who weighed worth in degrees and titles, I felt like a misplaced piece of a puzzle that didn't belong to me. Then something happened that made the room grow colder. Emily's father leaned back, crossed his legs, and said casually, almost too casually, "Daniel mentioned you live modestly." There was that word again. Modest. Plain. Simple. All versions of the same judgment. I kept my expression soft. "Yes," I said.
I have everything I need." Her mother tilted her head slightly. "Do you rent or own?"
It was such a direct question, so sudden, so personal. I felt my breath catch, not because I was embarrassed, but because I could hear the real question behind her words. Do you have money? What kind of family does my daughter marry into? I own my home, I replied gently. It's small, but it's filled with memories. There was a pause, a long one. Small, her father repeated quietly. Emily's eyes darted toward me. I could see the tension building in her shoulders. She knew where her parents' curiosity was headed. She knew how they measured people, and she knew I didn't fit into their scale. She reached out, touching her mother's arm. "Mom, please." It was a whisper, but a meaningful one. Her mother didn't stop. "We just want to understand," she said. "These things matter in marriage." And that was the moment something inside me shifted. Not anger, not pride, just understanding. A deep, quiet understanding that they weren't judging me because of anything I did. They were judging me because they didn't know me. They didn't know the nights I stayed awake when Daniel was sick. They didn't know the double shifts I worked when my husband lost his job. They didn't know the sacrifices, the silent prayers, the tired hands, the lonely mornings, or the endless hope that comes with raising a child alone after my husband passed away. They didn't know any of it. To them, I was a blouse with a loose thread, an old skirt, shoes too worn to be elegant, a small house, a modest job, a mother who did not match their world. I was about to speak, very softly, very carefully, when the doorbell rang. Emily stood up immediately. That must be my sister. Her sister walked in, younger, lively, dressed beautifully. She greeted everyone with warm smiles, but when her eyes landed on me, something flickered in them. Curiosity, surprise, and then something else. She leaned close to her mother and whispered, not softly enough this time. "That's her? I thought she would look different." Different. Another word for better. The room went silent for a moment. I kept my face calm, my hands still, my breath steady. I was used to life being hard. I was not used to being looked at like I was less. Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom's not feeling well today," he said quickly, trying to protect me. I looked at him, and that hurt more than anything, because he was ashamed, not of them, of me. I smiled gently at him, a small smile, the kind that hid everything I was feeling. "It's all right," I whispered. "Let's not make this uncomfortable." But the truth was, it already was. Then came the moment I didn't expect. Emily's sister walked to the kitchen, but as she passed behind me, I heard the whisper, the one that broke everything. "She doesn't look like someone who could give anything to this family." That sentence sank into me, heavy, final. I didn't move. I didn't react. I just let the words settle in the deepest part of my heart. Because for the first time that day, I understood completely. They didn't see a mother. They didn't see a woman who had raised their daughter's future husband with love. They didn't see someone who had survived pain and loss and still woke up each day with hope. They only saw what I looked like, And because of that, they believed I had nothing to offer. But they were wrong, so very wrong. And soon, they would find out. Because the truth they didn't know about me was bigger than anything they whispered. I sat there for a long moment, holding the words inside me like fragile glass. They didn't shatter on the outside. They shattered quietly on the inside, in a place I didn't show anyone. I watched them talk among themselves, smiling and chatting as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just measured my worth in whispers that weren't meant to reach me. But the truth is, the heart always hears what the ears were never supposed to catch. Emily sat beside me, gently placing her hand near mine, not touching, but close enough that I felt her intention. She didn't know what to do. She loved her parents, she loved my son, and she wanted everyone to belong to each other. But belonging isn't something you can force. It has to grow naturally. It has to grow in soil that's soft, not in one that's already hardened with judgment. When her sister returned with a plate of cookies, she placed them on the coffee table and said politely, "Please feel free to have some." Her tone was kind, almost too kind, the type of kindness people use when they're trying to hide what they really feel. I took one cookie, mostly so no one would notice my shaking fingers. Daniel moved closer and whispered, "Mom, are you okay?" I looked at him with a soft smile. "Of course," I said. "This is a beautiful evening." He knew I wasn't telling the truth, but he didn't want to make a scene. He squeezed my hand gently and stood again. And I watched him walk across the room, looking like a man torn between the family that raised him and the one he wanted to build. For a moment, I glanced around the living room. The polished surfaces, the elegant vases, the spotless carpet, the silent piano against the wall that no one had touched all evening. The air smelled faintly of lavender and something floral. It was a beautiful home, yes, but it wasn't warm. Not truly. Warm homes are not built with expensive furniture. Warm homes are built with acceptance. And here, acceptance had no place for me. After a few minutes, Emily suggested showing me the backyard. Maybe she sensed I needed a breath of fresh air. Maybe she needed one too. We walked outside quietly. The night was cool. The sky was clear. A soft breeze moved through the trees. The backyard was lovely, a garden with trimmed hedges, delicate flowers, and a small fountain that made gentle water sounds. A place meant for peaceful evenings. But tonight, it only held weight. Emily stood beside me for a moment before she spoke. "I'm sorry." I turned to her. "Why?" She let out a slow breath. "My family, they can be traditional. They don't mean to hurt anyone. They think appearances matter. First impressions matter. They were nervous." I nodded slowly. I didn't want to make her feel worse. She was a good girl. She loved my son. She was caught in the middle of expectations she didn't create. "It's all right," I said gently. "People misunderstand each other all the time." But she shook her head. "No," she said. "They were wrong today. You deserve better." The wind moved her hair across her face, and she brushed it back as her eyes began to soften with emotion. "When Daniel told me about you," she said, "he didn't talk about money or houses or what you owned. He talked about how you raised him, how you taught him to be kind, how you always supported him, even when you had very little for yourself." Her voice trembled a little. I wish my parents knew how much that means. I wish they understood the value in that. I smiled gently. They will, I said. Sometimes people take time to see goodness in others. She nodded, though I could tell she wasn't convinced, but she appreciated the hope I offered her. When we walked back inside, the house felt even colder than before. I heard her father talking to her sister quietly. "She's pleasant," he said, "but Daniel should have prepared us for less sophistication." Less sophistication. Another phrase, carefully crafted to sound polite, but wrapped in sharp edges. I sat down again quietly, pretending not to have heard, pretending it didn't matter. It mattered. Every whisper mattered. But I wasn't ready to respond, not yet. Teacups were collected, plates were cleared, conversations continued around me like a soft hum. And then, when I thought the evening couldn't twist any further, Emily's mother sat beside me. She sat gracefully, hands folded, voice low. "Daniel is very important to us," she began. "Emily, too. We want their life to be steady, secure, comfortable." I nodded gently. I understand. She hesitated for a moment before continuing. "We're just trying to make sure everything aligns." A single word with 1,000 meanings. Aligns. Align backgrounds. Align standards. Align families. Align worth. I could feel something inside me grow heavy. Not sadness this time. Something deeper. Something slower. Like a quiet acceptance of the truth of who they were. "I only want my son's happiness," I said softly. "I know," she replied, "and we want the same for our daughter." Her eyes flicked toward my clothes, then back to my face, so quickly I almost pretended I didn't see it. Almost. People reveal themselves in glances, not speeches. Emily's father approached next. "May I speak with you for a moment?" he asked. We moved slightly away from the others, just enough for privacy, but still within the room. He cleared his throat. "Daniel mentioned that you manage things well on your own." "I do," I replied softly. He hesitated. "And financially, you're comfortable?" There it was, the true question, not whispered this time, asked directly. I looked at him calmly. "I live simply," I said, "but I have always handled my responsibilities." He nodded slowly, but I could see he didn't believe that was enough. And then he said the line that made everything clear. "Emily comes from a certain lifestyle. We only hope Daniel can provide something comparable. We hope your side will not be a burden." A burden. A word that dropped between us like a stone. I felt my heart tighten, but my voice stayed steady. "I am not a burden," I said gently, "and I will never be one." He gave a small, polite smile, the type people give when they don't agree but don't want to continue the conversation. I returned to my seat, quietly, calmly, but inside, something had changed, something had settled, something had awakened. I had come to their home pretending to be poor, pretending to be simple, pretending to be modest. A test, a quiet test, one only I knew about, and they had failed it at every turn. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly guess, was that the truth about me was far different from what they assumed. And soon, very soon, their whispers would no longer wound me. They would silence themselves, because the truth that they didn't know was waiting like a quiet storm, gentle at first, but impossible to ignore when it finally arrived. Later that evening, as the guests trickled away and the house quieted, I stayed for a moment longer with Emily. She had excused herself to tidy the kitchen, but before she left, she looked at me with a soft, worried expression. "Mom," she said quietly, "I wish they could see you the way I do. You don't need to pretend anything. They don't understand yet." I smiled at her, a small, gentle smile, but inside, my heart was heavy. "Sometimes it's easier to observe first," I whispered, "to understand what's really going on before revealing everything." Emily nodded, though she didn't fully understand. She was young, and her parents' world was something she had known all her life. She hadn't realized how layered these families could be, how judgments could hide behind manners. I moved to the window and watched the soft glow of the street lights outside. The air was still, quiet, and filled with that cool, gentle feeling that comes after the rain. I remembered the first day Daniel had come home with Emily, how nervous he was, how excited, how proud he had looked holding her hand as if he were showing me his own happiness. But that pride had been tempered tonight. Watching my son navigate his parents' expectations while trying to protect me had been a painful sight. I realized then that love alone sometimes wasn't enough. Respect and understanding were just as crucial, and they couldn't be faked. Emily returned from the kitchen, holding a tray with a few soft cookies. She placed it on the small table beside me and said, "I made these for you, my favorite recipe." I picked one up and held it in my fingers, looking at her with warmth. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said. "You have a good heart. I can see that clearly." Her eyes glistened for a moment, and I noticed how much she wanted to bridge the gap between her family and me. She was trying, in her quiet, gentle way, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. I decided to take a slow breath, letting the evening sink in. The polite smiles, the whispers, the careful tones, they all painted a picture of a family that measured worth in the wrong ways. But I refused to let it define me. I had raised Daniel with love, with patience, with values that mattered far more than polished manners or expensive clothes. As I sipped my tea, I let myself imagine a different moment, one where the whispers wouldn't matter, one where they would finally see who I truly was, not the modest blouse or the worn skirt, but the life I had lived, the love I had given, the strength I had quietly carried. It wouldn't be easy. I knew that. Some lessons took time to sink in. People sometimes had to confront their own biases before they could see the truth in others. And then I remembered what my own mother used to tell me. Strength is not always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet refusal to break under judgment. I held that thought close as Emily and I sat in the soft lamplight. The kitchen smelled faintly of sugar and butter. The room was quiet, save for the faint ticking of a clock. And in that quiet, I felt something shift inside me. I realized that tonight had not been about me pretending. It had been about understanding who they truly were, about seeing their fears, their judgments, and the walls they built to protect themselves. And more importantly, it had been about learning how to protect my own heart in the process. Soon, Daniel joined us. He sat quietly beside me, not saying much, but the way he held my hand, the way he leaned in slightly, told me he was aware. He was aware of the whispers. He was aware of their judgments, and he loved me anyway. That love, even without words, was enough to strengthen me. Emily returned to the living room, and I could see the unease in her posture. She wanted to fix everything, but some things can't be fixed in one evening. Some understandings take time. I smiled at her reassuringly. "Be patient," I whispered. "Sometimes people need to see life differently before they understand." The night deepened. The house grew quiet. I could hear the faint hum of the city outside, soft and distant. I sat back and closed my eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of my son's hand and Emily's presence calm me. I thought about the whispers I had overheard, the judgments I had felt, and I realized that they had not hurt me because I doubted myself. They had hurt me because I saw the love of my son being weighed against these judgments. But I would not let that love be diminished. I would not let their misunderstanding define my worth. I had come here pretending to be poor, pretending to be naive, pretending to be someone smaller than I was. And in doing so, I had learned something profound. People often fear what they don't understand. They fear honesty, simplicity, humility. And it is only through patience, quiet strength, and living authentically that they might one day see the truth. I looked around the room once more before leaving that night. The polished surfaces, the silent piano, the elegant decor, it would always remain beautiful. But I knew now that real warmth, real belonging, did not come from appearances. It came from understanding, love, and acceptance. And if they ever learned to see me for who I truly was, then perhaps we could build that warmth together. Until then, I would protect my heart. I would cherish my son. And I would trust that time, patience, and quiet strength could do what polite words and judgment could not. The next morning, I woke early, as I always did. The house was quiet, and the soft light of dawn filtered through the curtains. I sat by the window for a while, looking out at the neighborhood. Everything seemed ordinary, almost peaceful. But inside, my mind replayed last night's moments. The whispers, the glances, the subtle judgments. I thought about Daniel. He had been brave. He had stayed calm, protecting me from the worst of it, while trying not to make the evening awkward. I felt a wave of gratitude and love for him. He had always been a thoughtful son, and seeing him navigate this delicate situation reminded me why I was so proud of the man he had become. Emily entered the room, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "I couldn't sleep either," she said softly. She placed 1 cup in front of me. "I wanted to talk before everyone wakes up." I smiled, appreciating her gesture. "Good morning," I said. "I'm glad you're here." She sat across from me, a little hesitant. "Mom, last night I saw everything. The way my parents whispered, the way they looked at you. I didn't know how to handle it." I nodded slowly. "I know, I could see it too. But it's all right, Emily. This is their world, and we're guests in it. Judgments will happen. That's life." She frowned slightly, but they were so dismissive, so cold. "I hate that you had to hear it." I reached out, resting my hand over hers. "It's part of life," I said gently. "Sometimes people judge without knowing. It's human. But you don't have to carry their judgment for me. That's my job to bear. My heart, my responsibility." She sighed, leaning back slightly. "I wish it didn't hurt so much. Seeing my parents like that, it made me feel helpless." I gave her a soft, understanding smile. "Feeling hurt doesn't mean weakness. It means your heart is alive. It means you care. That's a beautiful thing." We sat in silence for a few moments, listening to the faint hum of the street outside, the soft wind brushing against the window. Then Emily spoke again, voice quieter this time. I just want them to see you, to really see you. Not the clothes, not the house, not the money. Just you. I nod. They will, in time. Sometimes people need to see life's quiet truths for themselves. They need to understand what's real, not what's on the surface. She smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting hope and worry at the same time. I hope they do, for Daniel's sake and yours. I reached out and squeezed her hand. I know they will, Emily. But even if they don't, that doesn't change who I am. And it doesn't change the love I have for your family, for all of you. The morning passed slowly. Breakfast was quiet, soft, unhurried. Emily's parents moved about with polite efficiency, but there was a tension that hadn't been there before. Perhaps they noticed my calm. Perhaps they noticed I hadn't reacted to their whispers. Daniel kept glancing at me, his eyes filled with gratitude and relief. He didn't have to say anything. I could feel it. He knew that by remaining composed, I had protected him from an even deeper discomfort. That small act, quiet as it was, meant more than words could describe. Later, as the day wore on, I found myself walking through the garden. The flowers were bright, the air crisp. I paused by the fountain, listening to the soft trickle of water. It was a moment of peace, a reminder that life could hold quiet beauty even in the presence of judgment. Emily joined me again, carrying a small notebook. "I've been thinking," she said softly. "Maybe I can start showing them little things, things that matter. How important you are to Daniel, how much you've done for him." I smiled warmly. "That's a wonderful idea. Start small. Let them see the real you through your actions, not through words. The heart notices what the eyes often miss." She nodded, determination in her gaze. "I'll try. For Daniel. For you." The day passed slowly, filled with quiet moments of observation. I saw subtle changes in Emily's parents, small glances of curiosity, slightly warmer tones in their voices, moments where they paused before judging, as if something inside them was shifting, noticing me more than before. And I realized something important. The evening's whispers, the judgments, they were not the end of the story. They were only the beginning. Because change doesn't happen in a single night. It happens slowly, quietly, like the turning of a page. I returned to my room that evening, reflecting on everything that had happened. I felt neither anger nor bitterness, only a calm strength, a recognition that I had done my part and that the rest would unfold in time. Because sometimes the most powerful lessons are learned not through confrontation, but through patience, through presence, through simply being who you are, even when others cannot immediately see it. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. No whisper, no judgment, no polite dismissal could ever diminish the love I had given, the life I had lived, or the bond I shared with my son. That truth was mine, unshakable, and waiting to reveal itself in its own perfect time. The next few days were quieter than I expected. Emily's parents remained polite, but there was still a subtle distance between us. It wasn't hostility, it was caution, a careful observation, as if they were waiting to see whether I belonged in their daughter's life, whether I could somehow fit into the world they had built. I spent time with Emily and Daniel each morning, walking through the neighborhood, visiting small local shops, and sitting in the park nearby. These simple moments reminded me of why life could be beautiful without grand gestures. Children played nearby, dogs barked softly in the distance,
and the faint smell of fresh bread from a bakery drifted through the air. In these moments, I felt the weight of judgment fade slightly. Daniel often spoke in whispers when we were alone. "Mom, I hate seeing them judge you like that." I placed my hand on his arm. "I know, my dear, but their eyes will open eventually. They just need time." Emily joined us on one of these walks, her hand slipping gently into mine. She looked at me, her expression soft. "They'll see. Somehow they will see. And when they do, it will change everything." I smiled at her words. Her hope reminded me of a quiet truth. People's hearts often change when they witness consistency, when they see kindness and love lived out in everyday life. No grand declarations, no sudden gestures, just life being lived authentically. One afternoon, Emily's mother called me aside while Daniel and Emily were in the garden. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, "about last week, about everything I said." I nodded softly, waiting. She hesitated, then continued. "I may have been too quick to judge. I focused on appearances. I didn't see the strength behind them. I didn't see you." Her words were tentative, but they carried weight. I felt a small warmth inside me. This was the beginning, I realized, the first crack in the wall. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied gently. "I know change doesn't happen overnight, and I understand where you're coming from." She looked at me with a faint smile. "I hope I can do better. For Emily's sake, for Daniel's." "I believe you will," I said softly. Over the next few weeks, subtle changes continued. Emily's father began engaging in conversations, not just observing silently. He asked about my past, about my work, about the life I had built for Daniel. I answered honestly, calmly, without needing to justify myself. And each answer, each story, seemed to slowly chip away at their initial judgments. One evening, as we sat in the living room with soft music playing in the background, Emily's parents watched Daniel and I arrange some books on the shelf. There was laughter, gentle teasing, and an easy rhythm to our actions. I caught Emily's mother glancing at me with a smile, soft, sincere, unguarded. It was a moment that told me something important. Patience and quiet strength can gradually shift hearts. It doesn't happen all at once. Change is slow and often almost imperceptible, but it happens. I thought back to the night of whispers and judgments, the words that had cut deep. And now I could see that they hadn't had the power to define me. They were simply a test of my own heart, of my patience, of my ability to hold love steady in the face of misunderstanding.
Daniel leaned over and whispered, "Mom, I'm proud of you." I felt my chest tighten with quiet emotion. "Thank you, my dear, but it's not about pride, it's about truth." And I knew then that the truth, the life I had lived, the love I had given, the patience I carried, would always outlast judgment. It would always remain quietly powerful, waiting for others to finally recognize it. Weeks passed, and slowly, the atmosphere in Emily's parents' home began to shift. What once had been polite distance and quiet judgment started to soften into genuine curiosity and small gestures of warmth. I noticed her father asking questions about Daniel's childhood, about the lessons I had taught him. Her mother began sharing memories of Emily, stories that I had never heard before. One evening, as we sat together after dinner, her mother handed me a small photo album. "I thought you might like to see some of Emily's childhood pictures," she said softly. I took it gently, flipping through pages filled with laughter and memories. I felt something swell inside me, a quiet, warm feeling that spoke of connection.
I realized then that this was more than just acceptance. This was understanding. They were beginning to see the person I truly was. Not just a mother, not just a widow, not just a modest woman, but someone who had loved, struggled, and persevered. Someone who had shaped their son into the man they cherished. Emily squeezed my hand and whispered, "See, I told you. They'll understand." I nodded, feeling tears welling up. Yes, they are beginning to, slowly but surely. Daniel sat beside me, his arm around my shoulder. "Mom, I've never been prouder of you," he said quietly. His voice carried love, respect, and gratitude. "You've shown them who you really are, and they're seeing it now." The next day, Emily's father invited me to help plan a small family gathering. "I want everyone to meet the real you," he said, "not the person we thought we were meeting, the person Daniel loves, the person Emily respects, the person who raised our son." I felt a quiet joy. It wasn't a triumph over judgment or a victory in pride. It was the reward of patience, the result of quiet endurance, and the power of love. They had begun to see me, not just the image I presented or the clothes I wore, but the life I had lived, the heart I carried, and the warmth I offered. On the day of the gathering, I watched as Emily's parents interacted with me in a way that felt genuine. There were smiles, laughter, and moments of shared stories. Her sister even approached me, her voice softer than before. "I'm sorry for my words last week. I didn't understand. I see now." I nodded gently. "Thank you. That means a lot." It was a quiet reconciliation, not dramatic, not sudden, but it was real. It was heartfelt. And in that moment, I understood something essential about life. True connection is never rushed. It is earned through consistency, love, patience, and the courage to stay kind, even when others fail to see you at first. Later, as the sun set and the house settled into a peaceful calm, I sat beside Daniel and Emily. The warmth of their love, their acceptance, and the beginnings of family understanding filled the room. The judgment and whispers of the past felt distant, like shadows that had finally faded with the light of truth. I realized then that pretending to be poor, pretending to be modest, had not been about humility or trickery. It had been about observing, understanding, and preparing my heart for what was to come. And through it all, I had remained steadfast in my values, my love, and my strength. As I looked around, I thought of all the mothers, daughters-in-laws, sons, and families out there navigating the delicate lines between love, judgment, and understanding. I knew that the most important lesson I could share was this: patience and quiet strength often speak louder than words. Love endures, and the truth of your heart will always outlast misunderstandings. People may judge before they understand, but time, kindness, and consistent integrity reveal the truth more profoundly than any argument or defense ever could. I leaned back in my chair, letting the evening settle around me. Emily's laughter floated from the kitchen as she helped Daniel with something simple, domestic, ordinary, but beautiful. The soft glow of the lamps lit the room. The house finally felt warm, not because of the furniture or the decoration, but because acceptance had begun to take root. And in that quiet moment, I understood fully. The journey of patience, love, and understanding was worth every whispered doubt, every cautious glance and every subtle judgment I had endured. Life would continue, imperfectly, beautifully, and filled with the quiet joy of being seen for who you truly are. I smiled softly, feeling my heart lighter than it had in weeks. I had come into that home pretending to be someone smaller than I was, but I left it knowing this. My worth, my love, and my heart were always visible to the people who mattered most. And in the end, that was all that truly counted.